There's a dog sitting alone in a burned field outside Waco, Texas, and he won't move. Not for the firefighters, not for the police officers trying to coax him away, not even when the sun goes down and comes back up the next morning. He's been guarding something, or someone, who isn't there anymore. Nobody at that scene knows it yet, but this stubborn, grieving dog is about to do what nothing else could. He's about to solve his own owner's murder. This is the story of Mandy Rose Reynolds, and the one piece of loyalty that outlived her. Let's back up for a second. Before the fire, before the dog, before any of this made a single headline, Mandy Rose Reynolds was just 26 years old, living her life in San Marcos, Texas. It's a small city built around a big university, the kind of place where a lot of people are just passing through on their way to somewhere else. But for Mandy, it was home. The kind of town where everybody's a few connections away from everybody else, and family tends to end up close by, sometimes literally down the hall. She had a dog named Titan, a big, goofy white labradoodle who, as you're about to see, turned out to be a lot more than just a pet. And at the time, she was sharing her apartment with her cousin, who'd moved down from Wichita, Kansas. His name was Derek Joseph Daigneault. 29 years old. Family. I don't know what their day-to-day relationship actually looked like, and honestly, nobody outside that apartment really does. Maybe it was easy. Maybe there was tension neither of them ever talked about. What we do know is that by early April of 2023, something in that home had shifted, in a direction Mandy likely never saw coming. On April 5, 2023, police in the small town of Robinson, Texas, just southeast of Waco, got a call about a fire. On its own, that's not an unusual call. Fields catch fire out there, but this one was different, because when officers reached that field near a subdivision on Heston Circle, they didn't just find flames. Inside a burning storage container, they found human remains, burned badly enough that identification wasn't possible just by looking. And nearby, they found a dog who wouldn't leave. Titan was frantic, barking at the officers, refusing to leave the area, refusing to let anyone get close enough to catch him. And that's worth pausing on for a second, because labradoodles aren't exactly bred to be guard dogs. They're people pleasers, friendly by design. Which makes what Titan did next even harder to write off as just typical dog behavior. If you've ever loved a dog, you know it isn't nothing when one acts like that. Dogs don't guard empty ground. They guard what matters to them. Investigators eventually removed the remains for examination that night. Titan didn't leave. He stayed out there, alone, through the entire night. And the next morning, a passerby found him sitting in that exact same spot, like he was waiting for someone to come back. That person called Robinson Animal Control. And when Animal Control finally got Titan into custody, they found the one thing that would crack this case wide open: a microchip. That chip, smaller than a grain of rice, told them what the fire had tried to erase. It had a name attached to it: Mandy Rose Reynolds. I keep coming back to this part of the story. In an era of DNA labs and digital forensics, it wasn't some piece of advanced technology that identified her first. It was a dog's refusal to leave. Honestly, that's the detail from this whole case that I don't think I'll ever forget. Once investigators had her name, the picture started coming together fast, and it wasn't good. They traced her to an apartment in San Marcos, the one she'd shared with her cousin, Derek. But when they got there, the place was empty. Not just abandoned, but stripped. Furniture gone. Belongings gone. Every trace of the life she'd been living cleared out. And her car, a black Honda Accord, was nowhere to be found either. A medical examiner would later confirm that Mandy had died from a gunshot wound. Investigators would eventually trace that gunshot to a very specific weapon, a pistol that had belonged to Mandy's own grandmother. Sit with that for a second. Not a stranger's gun. Not something picked up off the street for the occasion. A family heirloom, in a sense, something that had probably sat in a drawer for years, meant to protect the people in this family, that ended up doing the exact opposite. With the apartment stripped and the car gone, this stopped being a simple local case fast. Before long, it would stretch across 2 states and pull in at least 3 different police departments: Robinson, San Marcos, and eventually, somewhere none of them expected. Investigators needed a lead, and they got one. a license plate reader picked up Mandy's Honda Accord. It wasn't anywhere near Texas anymore. It had turned up more than 500 miles away in Wichita, Kansas. Before we get into what happened next in Kansas, let me pause here for a second. If you're the kind of person who wants a case laid out carefully, with the facts in order, not sensationalized, not guessed at before the evidence is even in, that's exactly the kind of channel I'm trying to build. If you prefer true crime that waits for the truth instead of guessing at it, hit subscribe. It helps more than you'd think, and it means you won't miss where this one goes. Wichita, Kansas. If that name sounds familiar, it's because that's exactly where Mandy's cousin, Derek Daigneault, was from. Investigators reached out to police there and asked them to watch for a black Honda Accord registered to a woman they already knew, by that point, was dead. It didn't take long. Wichita officers spotted the car, and Derek was behind the wheel. What happened next tells you a lot about a person's state of mind in that moment.
He didn't pull over, he ran. Wichita police chased him through the city until it ended the way these things usually do, with the car wrecked.
When officers pulled him from that vehicle, investigators started connecting pieces that painted about as damning a picture as you can get. Mandy's phone was recovered, the same phone they'd already used to help track his movements. And ballistics testing on that pistol, the one that had belonged to Mandy's grandmother, eventually came back matching a shell casing recovered from the scene of the fire. Her car, her phone, her grandmother's gun. All connected to the same man who'd been living under her roof. Not a stranger who'd broken in overnight. Not someone from her past resurfacing with an old grudge. Someone who probably knew Titan's morning routine as well as she did. What really gets me about this part isn't even the chase or the wreck. It's the geography of it. He didn't disappear into hiding somewhere remote. He drove home. Back to his own city, like he thought he could fold all of this into the rest of his life and just keep going. Derek was already facing a separate charge just for that chase, fleeing from Wichita officers and wrecking the car during the pursuit. That charge alone would later add more than 9 years onto whatever came out of the murder case. But at the time, it was almost a footnote compared to what Texas prosecutors were building against him. Because now they had a suspect, a murder weapon, a car, a phone. And somewhere back in Texas, Mandy's family was getting the kind of call nobody wants. Not just that their daughter, their granddaughter, their sister was gone, but that the person responsible was the same person who used to sit across from them at holidays. The case took over a year to reach trial. In November 2024, in Waco's 19th State District Court, a McLennan County jury sat through all of it. The ballistics report, the timeline, the digital trail from that phone, testimony tying Derek to every piece of evidence. It took them about 35 minutes to come back with a guilty verdict. Not long after, in a separate deliberation, that same jury took roughly 40 minutes to decide he should spend the rest of his life in prison. 35 minutes for a life. That number still sits strangely with me. Not because I think the verdict was wrong. It's more that a jury needed less than an hour to reach the same certainty it took investigators over a year to build, piece by piece. At sentencing, Mandy's mother, her stepfather, and her older brother stood up and spoke about what her death had done to their family. I won't pretend to understand what that's actually like. I don't think most of us can, not really, until we're the ones standing in it. Derek Daigneault was sentenced to life in prison. Cases like this always make me think about how much we take trust for granted. We lock our doors at night. We watch out for the stranger in the parking lot. And most of the time, that instinct serves us fine. But every so often, a case comes along that's a reminder the scariest scenarios aren't always the ones we were taught to prepare for. Here's the part of this story that never quite resolves, though, and I think it's worth sitting with instead of rushing past it. To this day, investigators have never publicly named a clear motive. Family. Blood. Someone who shared her home. And still, no real answer to the question anyone following this case has probably been asking since the beginning. Why? Maybe Derek knows the full answer. Maybe even he couldn't put it into words if he tried. Either way, the rest of us are left without it, and I think that's part of what makes a case like this linger long after the headlines fade. We want the why. We want it to make sense, because if it makes sense, We can tell ourselves it wouldn't happen in our own family. What actually solved this case wasn't a confession or a mistake Derek made under pressure. It was a dog who wouldn't leave a field. If there's one thing worth taking away from Mandy's story, let it be that. The kind of loyalty that doesn't ask questions, doesn't waver, and in this case, gave a grieving family the one thing they had left to hold on to: the truth. If this one stuck with you the way it stuck with me, let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.